Welcome back to the show today. We're talking about bad offense. A few weeks ago, I talked about bad defense and all the different ways you can spot a player who's lacking on the defensive end of the floor. But this week, we want to know why teams target certain players on offense by double teaming players who have the offensive juice and leaving these players wide open because they know there's no chance of that player putting the ball through the hoop. Well, why would a team put a player out there who's bad at the fundamental attribute of basketball, scoring? Well, usually it's because this player is a great defender. They're hoping that his ability to shut down the other team's offense outweighs the fact that they're playing with 4 guys on the other end of the floor. So let's start with the position where being low-key ass on offense doesn't really matter that much. The center position. The center is always the tallest guy on the floor. Usually his role is to stand near the basket and make sure the other team doesn't get easy percentage shots. Seems like a simple enough job. Most of your responsibilities involve being tall and putting your hands up. That's not to say there isn't any skill in being a center. Some players are taller and better at putting their hands up than others. Rudy Gobert has made hundreds of million dollars being tall and raising his hands. I'm obviously kidding. These players have to have really good footwork and really great reflexes to be a starting center in the NBA. But how does a center in the NBA underperform on the offensive side of the floor? Well, the most obvious answer is missing field goals. The bare minimum a center needs to do is put up easy layups and dunks. Typically, if you're looking at the league leaders in field goals, it's always a center because they play offense closest to the hoop. A good center should have a field goal percentage above 50%. So which starting center in the league this year has the worst field goal percentage? Unfortunately, it's Jaren Jackson Jr. Had to be someone. But this makes sense, right? Jaren Jackson Jr. is known as one of the best defensive players in the league. He's been all defense twice and led the league in blocks twice. Last year, he was the defensive player of the year. The general reputation of Jaren Jackson Jr. is that he's one of the best centers in the league. That's because the center position is typically a defensive position, the side of the ball that Triple J excels at. No one finds the need to point out the fact that Jaren Jackson Jr. has had a below average field goal percentage his entire career. His career average in points is only 16 a game. Not to mention he doesn't have like a playmaking ability like Nikola Jokic, another center, or he doesn't have the ability to create his own shot like another center, Joel Embiid. All that being said, Triple J is so good at defense that it makes up for these offensive deficiencies. Another way centers can be bad at offense is not being able to perform in the pick and roll. Maybe their screens are bad or they're even illegal. Illegal meaning they set a screen and then they move their feet. You can't do that. Or they really just don't know what to do when they roll. After the center sets the screen, he's supposed to roll to the basket. And if you're watching on TV, you can clearly see the passing lane where the guard might pass the ball to the center. Some centers don't really understand how to move to keep that passing lane open. So probably the second worst offense that a center could commit is believing he can shoot 3-pointers and trying to do a pick and pop. If you can't shoot threes, that's fine, but don't delude yourself into believing you can. This goes for all players, but it's primarily important for centers to know their limitations. The most egregious crime a center can commit on offense is being bad at shooting free throws. Free throw shooting is the free space in the bingo card of basketball. It's muscle memory. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. But players like Shaq, DeAndre Jordan, and Ben Wallace, probably the worst defender of all, have ruined games for their teams because they can't shoot free throws. They're targeted at the end of games, they're fouled, they have to shoot free throws, and they miss them. It's basically a turnover. Ben Wallace is the epitome of defensive god and offensive scrub archetype. He makes Dennis Rodman look like Kevin Durant, but at the same time, it's hard to find anyone who wouldn't say that Ben Wallace is the greatest defender of all time. He won Defensive Player of the Year 4 times. The only other player to do that is Dikembe Mutombo. But Wallace only averaged 5.7 points per game his entire career. Think about that for a second. This guy basically didn't play offense, but he was still inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame because of his defensive excellence. But the worst part of his game was his free throw percentage. Wallace never had a season where he shot over 50% from the free throw line. His career average was 41%. This means that when Ben Wallace went to the free throw line, it was more likely that he was gonna miss than he was gonna make. This brings me to my next aspect of bad offense, and probably the most sad, which is lack of confidence. When a player doesn't have the confidence to put the ball in his hands and make a play because he's afraid of criticism. Personally, I'd rather watch a player go for a big play and fail miserably and be really embarrassed than completely avoid the vulnerability of trying to make something happen. Ben Simmons is obviously a player who has become a victim of his own public perception. Even before 2021 in the Eastern Conference semifinals where he passed up a dunk because he didn't want to go to the free throw line. I don't want to talk about it, I've already talked about it like 100 times. Ben Simmons is always looking for a reason to give up the ball. And it sucks because Ben Simmons was one of the best point guards in the league. He's been all NBA before, he's been an all-star before. But now he's a complete zero on offense. He's constantly passing up the ball on easy opportunities. It's clear now that his instinct when he receives the ball is to give it up as soon as possible. He wants to pass it up lest he shoot and make a fool of himself. It's really sad to watch a player that was so good wilt and become a shell of himself. And not because of injury, because of fear of judgment. Ben Simmons would have my respect if when he he starts playing again. If he starts playing again, he just starts chucking. Just loads of shots, brick after brick after brick, just to show he's not afraid. One player I really admire is Alex Pokusevski. One of his first games in the NBA, he played incredibly confidently, but horribly. He sucked, but he didn't let it affect his effort. He just kept going for it, and he just kept failing. He didn't let his ego get in the way of learning from his failure. The dude ended up #1 on Shaqtin' a Fool, but now he's a legitimate NBA player with real value. Let Poku be an inspiration to you. The last type of bad offense I want to talk about is either not knowing the play or ignoring the play, or low basketball IQ moments. Now, Jason Tatum is definitely one of the 10 best players in the league, but last year in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, he blew the game with 3 consecutive turnovers. And the reason being because he disregarded the play and decided he wanted to play hero ball. In his first play, Max Strus is on him like white on rice. Creating his own shot is not necessary, there's plenty of time on the clock. He hangs onto the ball way too long and puts himself in a position where he can't put up a shot. He's forced to put up an awkward pass and Jimmy Butler punishes him for it. On the next possession, Tatum drives the lane and the Heat defense does what a good defense does and they collapse on. But instead of dishing it out after he's collapsed on, he goes for the drive. He continues his momentum and he can't stop, so he ends up traveling. My assumption is he was upset about how the last play went, so he wanted to make up for it and do something cool. I get it. But this leads to him making the wrong play. Same thing kind of happens here with the third play. Horford dishes it out to Tatum. Caleb Martin closes out on him perfectly. But instead of dishing to an open Marcus Smart, he goes up for the shot that doesn't exist. He then tries to pretend that he was going for a pump fake, but the ref was not born yesterday and calls a double dribble. This is obviously rare form for Jason Tatum. He's a great system player, but that's what happens when you let the game get to your head. You stop thinking about the right play and you start thinking about how you look. Personally, I think the player that exemplifies good offense is Steph Curry. Shocker. He knows where to move, he knows where to pass, he knows if he needs a floater or a scoop, and he knows that he can take certain risks that other players can't, because he can always bail himself out with a high percentage 3-point shot. Alright, thanks for being here. If you think I missed an aspect of offense or bad offense, let me know. I always reply and I'm always looking for new ideas for videos, so like the video if you did, dislike the video if you didn't. Be good to your mammy and be good to your pappy. Eat a corn dog.